This is the Lydia and Spin with Lydia Lunch and Tim Dolls, scattered around the globe as we often are. Hello, Timothy.
Hello, and I'm in Chaux de Fonds, Switzerland, and Dayon says hello. He's doing a great job with this festival here.
Yes, I mean, Dion of the Kaleidoscope of Nothingness, who's actually, he was the first person to put on Brutal Measures at a metal fest. Yeah.
Yeah, he's pretty bold and brave, and just does what he thinks should be done.
And so you're there with Azumi doing a festival that Beth B is also on, correct?
Yes, correct. It's a lot of stuff going on. There's film, music, dance. It's all this stuff. It's about, I would say it's like 80% women. And that was never officially a theme, but it just happens to be the case. And
that's
it's cool.
fantastic. You know, as we know, art of all forms is the salve to the universal wound, in my opinion. And speaking about the universal wound, this is the first time I've ever decided to do a GoFundMe for my project with Jasmine Hirst, Artist, Depression, Anxiety, and Rage.
Right.
Because every day there's more articles and there's more people, especially, you know, post-pandemic, that are suffering from this. I mean, the statistic is that, you know, 73% of musicians, I can't believe it's not higher, suffer from depression or anxiety. It's understandable considering, you know, the nature of what they do, bleeding their guts onto the stage, the page, the instrument, etc., the painting. And there was just an article that came out yesterday that there's a 135% increase in depression and 110% increase in anxiety in college students in the past 7 years. So look, we're focusing in with my documentary with Jasmine on artists, musicians, writers, and we'll have a poster up for that and a place that people could pass the word or donate or whatever, which would be very helpful. I mean, we appreciate all the help we can get.
And yeah, that's great. It should be helped because it should come out. And I've been thinking about it lately. And it's funny you say about college students. I think with a lot of the artists, whether it's instant gratification or, you know, even if they're very successful, you end up feeding a lot of things that are dissonant with the constructs that are within our civilization now on an everyday functional level. So it's the contrast. And I'm thinking with the college kids, just with the internet and like porn and masturbation, just constant like instant gratification all the time and feeding that part of the brain, and then having to juggle that with the practical reality definitely causes some problems.
Look, also the uprising insecurity because of so many unattainable icons of either physical perfection due to surgical enhancement or in pornography, you know, just absolutely fraudulent types of sexuality, which rarely exists in real life. And back to, you know, artists, I mean, the other thing too is if it's not insecurity, it's just there's a lot of disappointment. People get very jaded, you know, they're born to create. But I mean, I have never had any insecurity, but most of my friends have, which is why I had to make this documentary. The poster will be up. People can just, you know, pass the word on or help. Anyway, this is episode number 162, which is something to rejoice.
Yeah. Yes, I'm proud of it. It helped me quite a bit during the pandemic. Actually, I'm glad we've had this.
I think it's helped a lot. About it. I think it's helped a lot of people. Now, Tim, I love what Dominica once said about me. I smell her before I see her. Now, that's only because I wear such fantastic perfumes. But there is a new trend called vabbing. Have you heard about it? Vabbing, Vabbing.
No.
Well, I mean, I've never had any problem.
I don't know anything about it.
But it's supposed to help you attract a partner in the same way a sweet smelling perfume might. Now, vabbing is using your vaginal secretions to dab on your pulse points.
Whoa!
And it's supposed to be very good at the gym. Not that I go to a gym, But I can understand, I have in the past occasionally had someone dip their finger in my sweet camellia just to, intoxicate them for a momentary distraction.
What about abbing? What about abbing? Anal. What about abbing? Anal secretions.
Well,
You think that would work?
Well, there's enough of that going around, so I think I'd rather be vabbing than abbing. But that's up to you, Tim. I mean, knowing how good you smell, I'm sure even yours might smell like a petunia for all I know.
Come
Hibiscus.
on. Come on.
I don't know.
Oh, oh,
We're close, but
boy.
we're not that close. All right.
Well,
Yeah, go ahead, please.
speaking of smells,
Mm.
all these fucking fast food places have this kind of like fast food exhaust from their
Oh,
kitchens
yes.
or whatever you want to call it. Their little microwave lab things they got going with the pre-made food. I always thought Subway was like the most disgusting smell. Like I could identify it from a mile away. I'm like, oh no, I'm near this fucking shit.
Well, Tim,
I'm a little psyched.
I've never eaten nor smelled a Subway sandwich shop, but I've been on many Subways.
Avoid it. Avoid it.
All right. I avoid the Subway.
Jared was their mascot. Enough said. But well, one guy thought he could take advantage of Subway and Taco Bell, which happens to have the lowest grade meat out of all the top chains. Dmitry Kolov of Las Vegas realized he had this epiphany that it was just a bunch of kids working at all these places. And he thought maybe he could take advantage.
What a genius. He just figured that out. I mean, really.
Well, he kind of failed ultimately, but his little scam was he put on some kind of went to one of these kind of like industrial worker
Labs?
clothes outlets and put on a fake food inspector costume and started going to all these places. And these kids were like all submissive, like, okay, I guess you're inspecting our restaurant, quote unquote, and basically just started robbing all these fucking places.
Wow.
And it was just that basically the FBI caught on because it was just like, what's going on? There's like all these places are complaining that like all their money's gone, and then what's the connective thread is
the uniform
guy posing as a food yeah. And it worked for a second. Until it didn't.
It's hard to question a man in uniform, although I question them all the fucking time. You know me. I have nothing but questions. Anyway, speaking about smells, family unwittingly buys suitcases filled with dismembered bodies at storage unit auction. Now, they have those storage war shows on TV. Well, a family who tried their chances on a storage unit auction was shocked to find that they had purchased a cache of dismembered bodies stuffed in suitcases they had hoped contained untold treasures. This was in, believe it or not, Auckland, New Zealand.
Oh, yeah.
They found the bodies only once they hauled the contents.
That's interesting. Wow.
I mean, you just bet on whatever you think is in there. And they didn't realize until several hours later when they were at their home and they parked in the yard that they started opening it up a day later. And of course, police were called to the scene. When the first suitcase revealed body parts, at least 3 hearses showed up and they could smell the decomposed bodies. Now they're trying to identify the victims.
But how do they fucking not smell it upon the purchase?
They must have been sealed well. I don't know, especially in New Zealand where it can get quite toasty. Generally, storage units are auctioned off after whoever who rents it fails to pay, but it's unclear how old the bodies were or when the last payment was made. It's also unclear how much the unwitting family paid for the cargo that included the cadavers. Terrifying. Anyway,
I hope it's an inside job.
Inside the storage unit.
I hope it's an inside job. That's such a small population. I just don't. I don't know how this is no one's gonna get away with this. It makes no sense.
I think they'll track that down pretty quickly.
Yeah,
what a find! Quickly. What a find!
Incredible find. So, Dean Karnizes, he's one of these quote unquote ultra marathon runners, which is ultra marathon is a 150-mile run, and it involves these kind of like it's like skiing poles. There's all types of stuff going on. You're going up, down all this insane terrain. I mean, I think there would be a variety of terrain if you're running 150 fucking miles.
Oh my God,
So
yes.
I think you're gonna run into stuff that's just so. He's basically a skeleton. A guy like that's a skeleton to begin with, but he's basically a skeleton corpse, which attracted certain animals. And at one point, he turns around and realizes there's a coyote following him.
Whoa.
At which point, it attacks him. It just starts mutilating his face. But he has enough endurance, this guy, pretty impressive, to start beating the fuck out of it with the poles, and he actually got away. But he's got a mangled face now, a lot of stitches. These ultra marathon. There's these. Yes,
I believe there was a follow up to that story, Tim. I believe
you might.
I
okay.
believe he actually fell and ravaged his face and tried to blame it on a coyote.
Is that what happened?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I'm glad you informed me, because that's
it would be hard.
That's what they always say. Like, if there's one coyote behind you, not a big deal. It's when they pack. So a sole coyote kind of makes no sense.
No, a sole coyote will go after a small child or a small dog, not a man.
Right.
No,
not a man.
No.
And there's a thing about these ultra marathon runners, because they have these like sex cults and all this stuff, because they're really horny a lot. I think they're endorphin seekers to the max. And basically, I think these ultra marathon runners are nuts. I think in general, I think they're pretty fucking nuts. I mean, fine, you want to challenge yourself with your physical limits, but 150 miles, I think you're mentally fucking ill.
I mean, I might take the 150 step challenge. That's about it. That's about as far as I'm going.
Nice.
I don't know.
Nice.
I mean, I don't know.
Go ahead.
I am a marathon. That's all I can say.
Yeah, your life's a fucking marathon. Now, in terms of athletics, Easton Oliverson of Utah, his Little League team made the real National Little League World Series. And they're all excited, and they all went to Pennsylvania, it's some campus, to play this thing. Well, unfortunately, Ethan rolled over on his bunk. That he was on the top bunk. Now he's fighting for his life. He cracked his head fucking clean open, rolling over in sleep. And it's weird because we naturally paralyze ourselves in our sleep. But it still happens. And I guess there's 36,000 incidences like this a year of kids falling off the top bunk.
Well, you should not have more. First of all, that you breed at all is a problem with me, and that you have more than one kid and you need a bunk bed is another problem. And here we go. Brain damaged children. I know I'm starting to sound like a conspiracy myself, but whatever.
What about the Anne Heche thing? What about the Anne Heche thing? I mean,
obviously,
you sent me that thing.
Couldn't handle her drink or drugs.
She was always bonks.
Terrible childhood, terrible family, terrible romances.
Right.
I just couldn't take it anymore. And the weird thing is, supposedly, that day before the accident, she was in fine fiddle, and suddenly, I guess, just one line too many. I don't know. She crossed the line again. She
went on a cocaine binge, but you know what? Why she died was smoke inhalation.
Yeah,
I mean, she got it was just all the smoke coming from the engine. She was strapped in there, kind of like with concussion. She just like inhaled smoke for an hour.
Terrible. I mean, I don't know what to say.
Does insurance cover that? I mean, in terms of like the house that she destroyed?
Oh, I
hope so. Somebody's going to be paying.
I don't know. Yeah, exactly.
The woman lost everything. I mean, Anne Heche lost her life. The woman's house, she lost everything. It's tragic.
Oh, God.
Yeah, whatever. I don't know. But again,
that's it for my stories.
I mean, what else? No, I don't. But it just goes to show childhood trauma, depression, anxiety can often lead to habits that can hurt not only you, but other people. So anybody that wants to help, either by reposting this or contributing whatever you can, because it is an important topic and it's very important for me to get this out, they could just go to GoFundMe, Artist Depression, Anxiety, and Rage, documentary by Lydia and Jasmine Hirst. I appreciate any and all help. check out the trailer for Artist Depression, Anxiety, and Rage. I really hope it, you know, helps people not only suffering from these things, but people that don't and have loved ones that do. And in the meantime, on episode number 162, we have Andy from the band Eater, who were the youngest punk band, even younger than I, starting at 17. They started at 14 to 16, who were 76, 77 UK whippersnappers, stealing instruments and making noise, making a comeback now. And that's what I know. All I know is I'm Lydia Lunch with Tim Dahl. This is the Lydia and Spin, episode number 162 with Eater. This is the Lydia and Spin with Lydia Lunch, Tim Dahl, and our special guest, Andy Blade, from, besides many other things, the group Eater, the youngest, even younger than I when I started, UK punk band from the little bit more than the mid-70s. Thanks for being with us.
No problem. Nice to be here. It was 77.
77, same as me. How did the other guys even have instruments at such early ages?
Well, we you see, we needed instruments, obviously, because I had this imaginary group in my head that at school, you know, and it was just mine at first, and I was just
from the age of 12.
From the age of about 12, yeah. But then when I hit about 14, I met this other kid at school called Brian Chavette, who was like also a bit weird, and so I thought I'll tell him about this. Maybe he wants to play this game as well. And so then together we started doing this imaginary, so design posters and lyrics and songs and anything that didn't involve actually showing that you've got a group, you know. And we were telling our friends, trying to bluff our friends, they really did have a group, but they'd just never seen us rehearse before. They'd just never seen us play. Been playing guitar for years and everything. But
so you're also not just an early punk band. You're Malcolm McLaren before Malcolm McLaren.
You were your own Malcolm McLaren.
So we pressured ourselves into having to produce the goods, you know, like Proof of Life. It's this thing that we've been talking, this group called Eater, that I did nick the name from a Mark Bolan lyric, and we had to kind of prove that existed. So we needed guitars quickly, and with no way were our parents going to pay for anything like that. And they didn't even want us to be in the group. Well, they thought we were happy playing pretend groups in their head, you know. So they no way. So we had to organise a robbery on our local music shop. It was the only way. And I'd read that Pete Townsend, you know, the guitars he smashed up on stage, he used to nick from Denmark Street. And I thought, oh, that's really cool. But it turns out later, like we really did it. It turned out later, he said in an interview that he never did that. It was so, if anyone was saying it was him, fucking liar. But anyway, so we got away with it. We nicked 2 6 strings the first time round, and we forgot to get the bass because we needed the bass for our bass guitarist that we didn't have yet. So we went back again and got the bass. And,
from the same place.
From the same place, the poor fucking manager. I mean, because we used to case out the joint, you know, went back to the back of the shop at 5:30, end of every day, hat and coat and all of that. And so we figured out we had about 2 minutes to just one of us open the door, the other one run in, grab whatever he could, and then leg it. And we had this like really cool getaway plan where we just had to run a short way down an alleyway, then hide all the guitars down over someone's back garden wall. And then we could just walk out the alleyway again, and the police cars turned up. We're going, we're just schoolboys, you know, got our uniforms on and everything. And so that was how we got guitars. Got important.
Yeah, got away with a lot of things.
Do you remember what you got?
When you got a baby face, you get away with a lot of things.
There you go.
Well, yeah, I mean, if they had nabbed us, I'm sure they would have been happy to. But we got I got a 335 copy.
Okay.
An Eros 335 copy. It was beautiful rose, fucking gorgeous thing, and a jazz bass, Fender jazz, copy jazz bass, and Telecaster.
Did you go in knowing what you wanted?
Yeah, I've been looking at it for fucking months. You know, that's going to be mine.
Oh my god!
And that's what the bass player's going to have, and that's what the rhythm guitarist is going to have. And the only thing we couldn't get out there was the drum kit.
Yeah, that would be tough.
My brother, who was our drummer at the time, he did all the nicking. Really, he did all the hard work. We just waited outside for him to pass us things, and that was on the proviso he could become our drummer. But none of us would chip in for his drum kit or anything. Yeah, to go and work for that. So he
that was the most expensive thing.
Sorry,
that was the most expensive one.
Drums.
Yeah,
and the hardest to steal.
Yeah,
the hardest, but impossible to steal, unfortunately. Drum machine, if that had been around then, it would have been no problem.
No problem. Or maybe a Simmons synth drum pad, which wasn't around either.
Nobody wanted that shit. I didn't even own a guitar when I started Teenage Jesus. I wrote the songs on a 3-string bass. I had to borrow guitars, and amps. So that's what we had to do.
I did have a guitar in my house when I was a kid, and it had 2 strings on it. It was a horrible old Spanish guitar. And I wrote a couple of songs on that, actually, when I was really young. But in fact, the first song I ever wrote was a song called Why Did You Say That? And it's just, I'm not even going to tell you how it goes. So on this 2-string out of tune in banjo.
So you're basically 77. You're basically like the ghost of Mark Bolan's kind of, he dies in 77, right?
Yeah.
So it's like you, so then it goes on to, you guys are named after a lyric of his.
Yeah, he bestowed the mantle onto us. But
huge Mark Bolan fan myself. Yeah, huge.
Really? Yeah, same here. He was like, Alice Cooper, Mark Bolan, and Bowie, of course.
Yeah,
like,
me too.
God.
And you covered I'm 18. I covered Black Juju for years.
Oh, right. Black Juju, brilliant track. That Love It to Death album is such a great album, isn't it? We killed 18. Yeah, it's fucking such a lovely song. We just fucking hammered through it.
Did you change it to I'm 14?
I'm 15. Yeah, 15.
It's a mutual friend of Lydia and I. 18 is his karaoke go-to. As he's in his 60s now, it's presented in many ways. I think it kind of always works.
But Andy, one thing, like when you're 14, when you're that age, I mean, there was a lot of the music you just mentioned, like Bowie, Mark Bolan, Alice Cooper. They were on TV. That's how we got to know them, which was amazing.
Yeah. And that was the only, just through TV. But then I found a copy of Melody Maker, which was like the British Music Press big one. And one day in the park, and I was looking through it, and I thought, wow, all the bands that are on TV are in here, and loads more that aren't on it, all with weird names, and it was like a different world to go into. So from then on, I just bought Music Press every week, and gradually got sucked into it. And we did the Guitar Robbery, just like complete synchronicity with the Pistols having their first big kind of interview in Sounds magazine, the other magazine, and so it said in this article that Johnny Rotten says he wants more bands to form, and you only need to know 3 chords. You don't know how to play. You don't need to have to play. And we're thinking, wow, that's us. That's us. We don't know any of those things. And we kind of know 3 chords. And then and so it all went on from there. So if that hadn't happened, if the Pistols thing hadn't blown up, we probably would have just been a terrible band, and with no kind of catch to it. Like,
you might have been playing air guitar.
Yeah. Oh, actually, or maybe we would have been fucking huge. Who knows? Maybe the Pistols ruined it for us.
I mean, but there's a zeitgeist. I mean, it seems like all this stuff's happening within a span of months.
Yeah.
It's just
it seemed like a long time, but it was like it started. I mean, it kicked off properly. Our first gig was November 1976 with the Buzzcocks, or September 76 with the Buzzcocks, and by the time that March, we'd released our first single. So our first gig without a manager, without a record label, without any following, without anybody knowing us whatsoever, just because the timing was right. It was, and then it just like went mad. So within a month, we were like a proper band, and in the newspaper and everything, and with all the kind of ego stuff that goes with that. And we were like just having a laugh. We just dropped out. I dropped out of school, completely, and so did Dee. And it was just mad, and it just carried on like a roller coaster for about 6 months, and then stopped.
What was the first concert you went to? Do you remember that you went to?
Yeah, the first ever concert.
Yeah,
that was Sparks at the Rainbow. I love Sparks.
I love Sparks. Yep, I love Sparks.
What year was that?
Sorry?
What year?
That was 70. Well, it was Kimono My House, so whenever 74
or 75. Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, we those groups that you just mentioned that were also big influences on me, even if it's not reflected in our music, although we have covered some of the people that, influenced us, they were so important. And it was like that wave. And then there was the wave that came, after that, which was either punk or no wave, but they were very influential to us.
Yeah, I mean,
because
glam
they were
rock.
weird. They were all weird. Glam rock, exactly.
Glam rock was my, what I loved. That was like the thing that really sort of made me want to be in a band. And that was my aim, that was, we were going to be a great glam rock band. And
it's not too late. We need to return. Actually, we need to return to glam.
Well, actually, the band as they are now are really glam, so it's kind Perfect. Of weird how it comes around.
So the current lineup, we were talking before the record button was pressed, but you're saying how you're playing some of the older material, but it never sounded so good.
It's the entire album that's just been released, which is right here. Look. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
All right.
Great.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Very nice.
Yeah.
So what's on the new? Who put that out and what's on?
So what happened with this album is that the original album was released in 1977 because as soon as our label signed us, they wanted to get something out quickly to cash in on this thing. They were total, just getting what they could out of it. And because they had Dave Goodman on board, who was the Sex Pistols sound engineer and their first producer, we thought they were legit, but actually they were real fucking crooks and we never got a penny, etc. But so they wanted to get a record out quickly. So we recorded a single in November 1976, right? That wasn't released. They fucked up because they were trying to get the label together and didn't know how. So they didn't release it till months later in March, which doesn't matter to me. It didn't matter to me, except that everybody now says, oh, you could have been the first band to have a punk single out, as though that's really important. But I didn't really see it like that because I just thought, I didn't think punk would be genred into like this thing. I thought it's all just there's punk here, there's rock here, there's that. It's not the first punk single. It's one in a fucking long series of other singles that have gone before it. And but they didn't want that, and so now it's even worse, that whole punk genre thing, I think. But
hyper commodification. Yeah.
Okay, so back to what is on the new release then. Thanks for reminding me. So the original album was just hurried out really quickly, and it didn't have overdubs on it. It didn't have, some of the songs were just rough takes. It had a couple of terrible songs that I didn't even want, that I thought we'd just done for fun in the studio. And so I hated the album. I've never been able to listen to it at all. But in that time, weirdly, it's become like, staple textbook at the punk rock university. And it's like, it's a bummer for me because obviously it's nice to know that sort of, but it's kind of like someone looking at something before it's finished and saying that they like it before you finished it. And so what happened was that when our guitarist left, I got a chance to go back into the studio and put all of the guitar overdubs on it. And basically the guitar overdubs that I'd learned on my 335 copy that I'd stopped playing once I started singing. And the other guitarist, being very rudimentary, couldn't really handle them. So I put them all, and it sounded great, but I didn't get a chance to really listen to it all back. It just sounded great at the time, and I was out of my head on speed, and so was Dave Goodman, and it was just like fun blasting through all of the songs. But then I never heard them again until, in fact, I forgot all about them until some tapes turned up in Dave's attic after he died, and blah blah blah. So baked the tapes, got them restored and remastered, and sort of beefed up a bit, and it sounds brilliant now. It sounds exactly like, what does it sound? And the band now sound exactly like that. They've not heard either before, so they've not kind of got an old template. They just learned everything direct off the album, which is really punchy and really, it's a different album. In fact, I'm embarrassed about it. It's the way you want it to be, which is what's important.
Exactly.
And so then, now that this is coming out, I mean, you've got some upcoming pretty prestigious, interesting gigs coming up.
Yeah, there's some good ones.
Dinosaur Jr, Jay
Dinosaur
Wobble.
Jr is we're going to do some warm-up dates first, and Dinosaur Jr we were going to do that as Ant, because we didn't want to do the first Eater gig until this big London date with Jar Wobble, of all people. And but anyway, we're going to that's going to be our first official Eater gig with Dinosaur Jr. So that's going to be great, because Jay is going to join us for a couple of songs that he wants to do. He's a big Eater fan, and he's, you know, again, I can't work that out either, because, you know, if you listen to the Eater, the Chad Valley sound of the Eater album, then listen to Dinosaur Jr.'s fucking Sledgehammer, how did that influence that? I just don't get it. But then again, if you listen to the original versions of Waiting for the Man and Jeepster, you probably think, how did that end up like that as well? So but yeah, no, that's going to be great. And
yeah, what you just said is interesting, because you said, okay, how did what you did influence a sound? But the thing is, remember what influenced us, and we didn't sound like that sometimes, even when we were covering it, right? So there you go. I don't think you had any Sparks influence, neither did I in my music, but so it's interesting what people pick up that then becomes an influence to them. And sometimes it's just the energy, it's the aggro, it's the fact that you did it then, it's all of that.
Yeah, but it comes out later. I mean, I found that all of my influences I can recognize now and stuff right now. But yeah, when you're a novice at it and you're just trying to play the song all the way through, that would be just a start. You know, it's like difficult to get the nuances and all of that right. But that's what I loved about Ant, is that it's got all the nuances with the guitar bits, which make choruses happen and make verses sound right, and make, you know, without them, you know, it is like a source of irritation, especially when people say, like, purists say, you know, I want the original only. It's like, well, it's not actually up to you, you know.
Well, it's only not up to you, but I mean, just as you're saying, how did one thing go to another thing? If you are honest with your own filter and your own abstraction, your own perception, it's going to come out differently. And that is a problem I have with, like, more contemporary punk. Trying to synthesize the past is just, it doesn't work. It sounds work. And
that's why with this band, I mean, I was really skeptical at first, because I was the idea was suggested. I met this band, right? They're called JoJo and the Teeth. They're from London, and they're just fucking brilliant. They're a really good band in their own right. But there's something about them, you know, the way they play, they gel together. They're like a first proper band that I've ever met for years. Like, you just know they're a band. Before I even knew they were a band, I just knew they must be a band. And they were, and we got on and we had a real laugh and seemed to share a lot of the same aesthetics about what's wrong with everything. And it just kind of came about that it could work. I said, you know, there's a possibility that if we tried to do this, listen to the album a few times, and then we'll go and try it. And if it works, it will be, you know, brilliant. I know it'll be brilliant. If it's not brilliant, then it means it's failed, kind of thing. Because I plodded through the fucking Eater set before with, you know, ex-members and old, you know, bald bass players looking at their feet as they're plodding along the set, and it kind of even, you know, it just detracts from what the energy of it. You can't possibly replicate songs of a 15-year-old band did as old blokes. Now, obviously, admittedly, I'm the one exception out of the band, but somehow it doesn't matter, because the ingredients are all sort of right, and the noise they make is so perfect that it just kills at 100 paces. And so it gives you that kind of cockiness, you know, that, well, you know.
I understand completely, because I mean, with my group Retrovirus, I mean, which is like the Lydian jukebox, spanning almost the entirety of my career in short chunks, of which music is very different. A lot of it I never played live. Most of it nobody's ever heard, but coming at it with a new energy, with different kinds of musicians that bring something else to it, it just takes it to another level, the level that it has to be now.
Yeah, I mean, there's something about music that it doesn't really matter when you make it. When that spirit gets into it and it's suddenly good, you know, it doesn't matter at what point. If you can do that again, then that's you know, a miracle. But it's great, you know, it's brilliant.
How did you find your musicians?
I was just at a gig. I went to see a band called Wasted Youth, who were a band from the 80s, who were a really good sort of psychedelic furs type band. They played with them. In fact, they went on tour with them. And they were there. Their publicist, who's a mate of mine, was there, and he just found me talking to them, you know, and sort of introduced us, and that was it. And we, as I said, we just had a real laugh that night. It was like it's very hard to pin down and describe it, but it was really weird. It was after COVID and everything as well, you know, after not really going out to many gigs. to suddenly sort of, and I'd given up on the idea that any good bands in London exist, or in the UK, or in Europe, or anywhere existed.
Or anywhere.
And that to find that, you know, it's always a case of, you know, at first I thought, well, they look great, but they probably sound shit. And then find out they don't sound shit. And then I thought, well, the idea could work, but if I get to the first rehearsal, it's going to be so fucking embarrassing because I'm going to have to say, listen, I don't think. And all of those ifs didn't happen, you know, and it's just gone on and on from there. And then suddenly it's become its own kind of beast, and it's really fucking exciting. It's weird because I swear 3 months ago I would have sooner picked up a revolver and shot myself in the mouth than say I'm going to reform it in any capacity. But so yeah.
Oh, you seem thrilled about it. So
wait till you see it.
Are you guys coming to New York?
Well, we hopefully if we can get visas sorted out this time. I had a tour 2018 that was cancelled at the fucking day before because the visa I was promised did not. And I stupidly applied for a work visa, which was all the other bands that go out that I know, they all just go tourist visas and everything. I thought, I don't want to get to fucking LA or wherever and be turned all the way back round to London again.
Which does happen.
Yeah. And so the promoter agreed to pay for a really expensive lawyer to kind of sort it all out. I got the petition was like sworn in by people like, you know, people from Dinosaur Jr. and
and I'm sure the law really respects them.
Yeah, but all of that didn't matter in the end because it was all down to the interview. When I went for this interview with this ratty little cunt who obviously didn't like me, and it was just telling him fast, you know, like, so he read some of the petition. He goes, well, they say they're influenced. He goes, who else has been influenced, you know, by the band then? Because he'd not heard of the band. I said, have you heard of Kurt Cobain? And he goes, no. No, there's no point in me going on anymore. And what does it matter who's influenced? I'm just going there for a fucking festival and a few gigs.
Yeah. What's weird is when I sometimes would go into the first time I took Teenage Jesus to London, of course, we didn't have work papers. Again, this is 77. And we just had to say, we're bringing our instruments in because we're afraid they'd get stolen if we left them in New York. And that took a lot of bartering to get into the country because, of course, we were coming to do some shows. But now, because it's, you know, British and the US customs can be complete fucking dicks. But I always try to find the oldest man there and go, do you still have platforms in your closet? I know you were into glam. Then they just start laughing. Let me right through. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you meet the right one, especially if you meet someone that was a fan, that would be perfect.
But a fan of glam. I'm very good with authority because I do not have any fear of
Well,
them.
she I've seen her on multiple borders with Lydia. Not only does she, well, when you're in line queuing up, you size up the people in front of you and you go, okay, if I deal with this person, I have to kind of take it from this angle. If I see this person, I take it from this angle. Not only does she do that, she somehow manages to get the person she wants. I don't know how you do that, but like, you always end up with the person you want.
I was standing there though in the immigration office at the US Embassy in London, and it was very weird, right? Because a few years before then, right, I had been to Israel, and like quite a long time before then, I'd been to Israel, and it is Israeli, because of my name is Radwan, my second name is Dad's Egyptian. They didn't like the name, and they gave me a lot of hassle about it, and I was detained twice just by nosy security guards who have got the power to do it. And so they ended up deporting me anyway. So
were you going there to do a gig?
They stamped this little red dot in my passport, right? And that was the same passport, you know, that I then went to California a couple of years later, and a big fuss happened, you know, and the red dot thing, and so anyway, them turning down my visa. See, when I turned up to get my visa, this is the first time I'd been back to the US visa people for years and years, and so I was a little bit worried. And then, but you know, I've not done anything. This is a real dot. Doesn't mean I was a terrorist.
Andy, I can relate 1,000,000%.
and so the guy was standing there looking at my visa, looking at me. He's called his mate over, and I can see him, you know, pointing at me, him over there. And I really felt something was up. But then I started thinking, no, I'm just being paranoid. They just turned you down because they're a cunt and they turned everybody down. But I'm still not too sure about it. So if I can sort that out, I'll be over in a jiffy.
Well, you know, I was on, and it's still not explained why, to go into Canada on a list for, as they told me, 95 years. Even though I always got in, I never did anything. They don't know. Someone didn't take a liking to me. And Lydia kind of straightened that out for me too. That's a whole other story.
Well, that's because I just was looking deeply into the eyes of the older gentleman. He actually called me over to talk to me, and I'm like, "This is a problem," and he said, and he did straighten it out. I might have to be your tour manager, Andy. I don't know. You might have to import me. Yeah.
That senator you've got, called Senator Gilbrand, Kirsten Gilbrand, is it? You've got something.
Oh, okay. Kirsten Gillibrand. Oh,
Gillibrand.
God.
Yeah. She, the lawyers in New York, they got in touch with her so she could then hassle the London, and it still didn't help. So that's what.
My hands might be tied on that one. I'm not sure.
I think, well, you give it a go with some of your contacts.
Well, she's connected with the Clintons who've been.
Oh,
so
not me.
So they have a lot of enemies too. They have a lot of enemies too.
Not me.
He can send his private jet.
No comment. His or someone else's.
One of the private jets.
Wow. Well, that's a whole other subject. You mean Epstein's jet that he was on 35 times?
Oh my word.
That's weird, wasn't it?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Exactly.
Apparently, Ghislaine Maxwell she's in this like luxury prison, gets everything she wants in this ward she's on, and it's all because of this plea. I've been told today, might be bollocks, that this plea deal is that she's got this list.
Oh yeah.
And because she's agreed not to go for it, she's just going to get.
Well, that's believable. She was definitely for a while in the holding pen just down the street from my studio in Brooklyn, where we're also what's his name. The drug lord from Mexico was at
El Chapo.
El Chapo. They're in the same building for a second.
By the way, I call her Jizz Lane.
Yeah.
My name for her, Jizz Lane.
I don't know why I pronounced it properly just then.
Maybe you haven't heard me give my speech on that. We're back with Andy, and he's going to read something from one of his. You put out 2 books, correct? So important.
Yeah. This is called Outside View. It's on.
Love the cover.
It's a pretty good. It's a nice.
I think it's so important to write memoirs, especially it's very important.
Yeah, and it's good fun.
Bless us with some details there, my friend.
This one is about meeting Lou Reed at Speakeasy. Not the Speakeasy, Dingwalls. So, and it's called Lou Reed. The highlight of Lee's stint as Lee Black Childers, that is, the highlight of Lee's stint as Eata's manager, at least for me, came at a gig in Dingwalls, a hip nightclub in Camden, which had also embraced punk early on. As we sound-checked, Lee received a call in the box office. We had a special guest coming along that evening, a certain Lewis Reed. Lou was in the UK promoting his new album, Rock and Roll Heart. His schedule included a couple of nights at the London Victoria Theatre. Because of Lee's connection to the great man, he'd taken the opportunity to introduce Lou to his new kids. Brian and I had been listening to Lou Reed on the radio just a couple of days before, and were already excited that he was in London. That was really weird because we really were just listening, and then like a couple of days later, meet him. So for Lou and Rachel, his current wife/husband, hanging out with that old junkie, Johnny Thunders, were a bunch of fresh-faced 16-year-old boys who worshipped the ground he walked on. There was no choice to be made. He could have gone to see Johnny Thunders that night, apparently, Lee said, but he chose us, of course. I was more than a little bit excited, but at the same time, I could hardly believe he would show up. Before stage time, Brian and I were pacing trance-like around the dressing room. Do us a favour, go and make sure his name's definitely on the guest list, will you? I suggested to Brian for the 4th time in 2 minutes. I just did. The girl on the door already thinks I'm mad for asking. She doesn't believe it's the real Lou Reed we're on about. She keeps taking the piss out of me. I wondered what our pussy friends at school would have thought. No doubt they would have disbelieved us too. Just as we were about to go on stage, Lee dashed excitedly into the dressing room. Lou's here, boys. Break a leg. That is his accent, isn't it? He gushed in that almost musical southern drawl of his. I'm not doing it again. We're sitting at a table to the right of the stage, Andy. He's watching you, kid. He winked, squeezed my shoulder. I felt a rush of adrenaline, followed by a crippling attack of anxiety as we began to make our way to the stage. There he was, the unmistakable figure of Lou, sitting at a table with Lee, the legendary Lisa and David Robinson, and Rachel. To be honest, I had no idea it was Lisa Robinson and her husband until recently, when Thurston Moore of Sonic Youth pointed out to me, after looking at the pictures taken by Louis, that it was them. The names Lisa and David Robinson had always cropped up in the underground US music magazine Cream. But I imagined, this is true, I imagined her beauty to be beyond compare. I don't know why, I just did. Even after all these years, I'm devastated we were so oblivious to the heroes and heroines in our myths, and just slightly disappointed that her beauty didn't travel that well. Are you catching any of this?
Oh,
Shit.
edge of my chair.
We raced through our set like we'd never raced through it before, eager to get it over with so I could go and join Lou at the table. Our versions of Waiting for the Man and Sweet Jane were barely recognisable, but we played them anyway. How could we not? Neither Brian nor I bothered with cooling off backstage, opting instead to jump off the stage, making a beeline for the coolest table in the room. We sat down. Lee flagged a waitress. Lou passed around his Marlboro 100s, the stubs of which, I'm sorry to say, Brian and I kept as souvenirs. Dee and Ian, to whom Lou meant very little personally, bass player and drummer, sneered at the fuss we were making, only joining us for a photo call after they'd freshened up. I didn't notice until we got the pictures from Lee that Dee was stood behind me pulling silly faces. I wouldn't have noticed if Johnny Rotten had crept up on us and pissed on me. I found it hard to comprehend that I was sitting next to Lou Reed, smoking and chatting away like long lost friends. Lou, to me, was God, and generally, God is not available to sit, smoke and chat with. God, the elusive motherfucker, had been absent in my life so far. Lou had always been there for me, but only in my wildest dreams could I have ever imagined such a thing as this. Brian and I hung on his every word as Lou pointed out the vase of fresh blooms sitting on the table. He took the flowers in his hand, removing them from the water bowl, and then waved them in the air. You know, when an audience chooses to watch a band from a table, they hide behind stuff like this. He tilted his head to one side as he spoke, as though playing peekaboo with a baby. We shouldn't let them get away with it. If they can't be bothered to get up and boogie, there's some very direct action you can take. He put the flowers back in the vase. Rachel, absorbed, scratched her stubbly chin. What you do is this: conceal a tiny but powerful set of speakers amongst the bouquet on every table. Then, when the band starts playing, if everyone isn't already up on their feet, the wallflowers will get their heads blown off by the table flowers. They'll soon get the message. His profound words hung in the air as he leaned back in his chair, nodding at me. Suitably moved, I nodded back at him knowingly. In reciprocation for being on the guest list, Lou stuck Brian and I on the guest list for his show the next night. It was the first time I'd seen Lou Reed live in any capacity, TV included. By rights, it should have been a religious experience. I started getting bored though after a while. There was too much new stuff, and when he did play one of the classics, it was a jazzed up, almost cabaret version, and he went on a bit. The religious experience had taken place the previous evening. There you go. There's a nice picture of us sitting around the table with Lou.
Understandable. I actually went off Lou Reed right after Berlin.
Yeah.
Well,
it's difficult reading. But you read it.
No. I went off listening to Lou Reed after the album Berlin, although I really love the song Kicks from Coney Island Baby. And
Coney Island Baby was good.
And Waves of Fear.
Waves of Fear with Robert Quine. Just absolutely amazing.
I'd stopped bothering by then, I think.
I think you should, right after this chat, check out Waves of Fear. It's great.
Waves of Fear, yeah.
Just that song, yeah.
I will.
But it's got Robert Quine. How could it, go wrong?
Yeah, I will. What I disapprove of with Lou is that he stopped singing after about, Rock and Roll Heart. He stopped singing songs. It was all talking songs, and
he had his limitations.
But he can be let off excused for all of that because he's done so many fucking great albums. So
great
he
songs.
can be excused. He could be excused for doing a lot worse.
When did you go off of David Bowie?
Before Labyrinth. But Labyrinth sealed the deal.
I went off after Diamond Dogs. That was the cut when he released Young Americans.
That was the last good album.
I was furious.
That's right. That was the last good album. Diamond Dogs.
Amazing album.
Yeah, and then he went all fucking soul.
whatever he went. But there is one, I think there is one album, and I don't know what year it is, but it's called Outside. You might not.
Oh yeah, I do. I've got a friend that still insists on buying Bowie albums, and I've seen that album.
Well, Outside, I think, because Bowie took so many of his ideas from so many other people, was based a lot on the writings of Derek Raymond, the British crime writer. Just think about that, and maybe check out Outside.
Yeah, but again, Bowie can be excused even for that wig in Labyrinth, and it's
let me ask you, short, after you're 16 and you're growing up more and you're interacting with all these people that you've suddenly connected with, and then of course punk kind of starts falling apart and going to post-punk or even the new wave, new romantic. I mean, because you were talking about glam influenced you, obviously on a very different synth level. Glam obviously influenced a lot of the new romantic bands too, if you want to call them that, just based on the presentation. Yeah. And in fact, some of the musicians you played with went on to play with some of those bands. What did you think when all the synth stuff started coming in? Were you
I thought it got boring?
You got boring, and
it was getting right. Punk obviously was really exciting. I mean, the music scene was exciting before then, whatever they say, but punk made it, obviously because I was involved in it. But suddenly became really exciting, and then there was a lot of interesting when punk sort of fizzled out after about a year or whatever.
Right.
The aftermath wasn't bad. There was a lot of interesting bands like Magazine.
I love Magazine, Joy Division.
The only ones were brilliant, and so I thought that's good. There's lots of interesting bands that punk has produced, sort of thing, and it will continue like that. But then suddenly, along came. It's because David Bowie released Ashes to Ashes again.
Huge, and then the Blitz and all that scene came out. Exactly. I mean, did you like the first Public Image Limited albums?
I like the first single. I reckon the rest of it was all King's New Clothes. I don't rate it at all, really.
I thought Keith Levine was an amazing guitar player, and just fell off the map completely. I mean, in the 30-40 years since, I think he's released one EP. A total shame, because he was amazing.
Yeah, I think they just needed some songs. They had the aesthetics, in place for a sound, but to me, that sound, buying a fucking box set with 5 records in it would be, nothing.
When you, as a youngster,
I should take that back. Joel Wobble is playing that metal box album at the gig that I'm doing with him. So on that occasion,
you'll really take it back. Who were you palling around with at 16, 17? I mean, were you hanging out with any of the other bands at that time?
Funny you should mention that. It segues nicely into Jar Wobble, because the last time I saw Jar Wobble, he wasn't called Jar, he was just called Wobble. And he was a mate of John Lydon's, and John used to hang around with 2 other Johns, like John Wardle Wobble and John Gray, who's his Rambo friend, and John Rotten, of course. So 3 Johns, I used to call them. And they happened to, there was an episode with, won't go into detail.
Why not?
Yeah, well, it's a bit of a story. Remember Nora? I don't know if you know Nora. Did you know Nora?
I did not know Nora. No, I was.
You know who I mean, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she had just started going out with Johnny Rotten. She'd split up with Chris Spedding, the guitarist, and I like Chris Spedding, and I felt bad for Chris Spedding that she split. But anyway, that's another story. Anyway, she seemed to like me one night in a club we were at. She made it clear that she liked me, and
she liked you for that one night.
and she started chatting to me, and I was really stoned. I was like, I'd never really smoked dope before, and a huge spliff someone gave me, and it made me go all weird. And the last thing I wanted was a woman, the age of my mum, coming to have a little chat with me. And she stunk of this perfume that I just associated with my Auntie Birdie, who chemically castrated her nephew just by her smell. So I didn't like it. So she didn't really care. That's a joke.
A good one.
I smell is very important. You don't want somebody
anyway,
smelling.
Exactly. And whenever I smell that smell now, I think of something cloying trying to get me. Anyway,
a heavy, dark, musky aroma. Would it be? I understand the type of smell. Oh,
so she chatted me up and said, "Do you fancy?" She got me a drink, and I sort of perked up a little bit. And she goes, "Do you fancy some speed and maybe drive my car? There's an old car park near where I live. I'll let you have a ride around that, and then I'll drive you all the way back to Finchley, where I had to get back to in North London. And West London is like the other side. So I should have suspected a rat then. But anyway.
Well, you smelt one. You should have suspected one.
So we end up in this car park, and I crash her car inevitably into a bridge. You know, I'm trying to get through this bridge, but the only way I could keep the car straight was by going fast. I kept telling her, she kept grabbing the wheel and saying, no, don't go so fast. And I said, stop it. And we go to the bridge. She goes, no. She tried to take over and into the fucking thing. And so I smashed her car up badly and put all the bits in the back. And I felt duty bound to go back to her house, not make her drive all the way back to Finchley and get pulled up. So, and then she I don't want to get too graphic about this. I wasn't
sensual harassment.
I wasn't into the whole thing, put it that way. And she had to really work on it to have her wicked way with me. And then I crashed out, right? So I crashed out in her bed. I was supposed to be sleeping in her daughter Ariup's bedroom because she wasn't there. So that was suddenly it was no, sleep in my bed. And so she, you know, I went in and I said, okay. And she said, I'll sleep in Ari's room. I said, all right. And then like 2 seconds later, and then she comes in. And anyway, so that goes on. And then I fall asleep. And then it's about 3:30 in the morning or 4 in the morning. And there's this crashing about going on. And Johnny Rotten who had a key. And he's turned up, pissed out of his head with Wobble and his mate Rambo. and she didn't expect them. Obviously, she didn't expect them, and I definitely didn't expect them. There was the threat of that I would never have ever gone. And so they come upstairs and they piss into these they empty out these bottles of fairy liquid, like, you know, washing up liquid, and they all piss in a one each, and then they make their attack and they like burst into the bedroom and I suddenly, Laura goes, hide, and I fall down the side of the bed. I'm trying to hide under a like duvet thing, and they're squirting piss all over me. And that's the last time I saw Wobble. So it'll be interesting to see.
Wow.
These days.
Wow.
Wasn't called Johnny Rotten for nothing.
No, he was a bit scary that night. I mean, they were all so fucking pissed as well. I had school the next day, you know what I mean? And I couldn't just walk out at 4 a.m, you know? And so Nora made me a little bed downstairs on the sofa and wait for the first train and get home. My mum goes, where have you been? You know? And I make up this excuse. And the worst, goes on, right? The worst thing is, so I go off to school that day, just making it in time. I come home and guess what's parked outside my mum's house, but a broken up BMW. Nora's broken BMW. So I go, oh, what the fuck is going on? And I thought, oh no, and I didn't know what was going on. I went upstairs and my mum was kind of smiling and seemed quite happy. And Nora was sitting there looking at an old photo album of me as a kid and stuff. It's like weird, a little cup of tea and some biscuits. And I thought, she told us something. And I kind of sussed it out that she'd come round to kind of find out if I had said anything about being assaulted the night before by Johnny Rotten, who couldn't do with being in the papers again at that time.
Oh,
all the other
no biggie that she kind of assaulted you, but
yeah, exactly. And I wasn't sussed enough to say, right, fucking, how much is my story worth to the Sun?
Hello.
Well,
she was pulling she was not pulling a Me Too. She was pulling a You're Next. Yeah, you better have a little sip after that one, honey.
But it's a good memory, I suppose. I know it's not actually a good memory. It was actually really horrible. But
well, and you were what at that time? 15, 16?
15. I was nearly 16.
Yeah.
Dodgy, getting very dodgy. But it's kind of, if we're on that subject,
why not?
there's a lot of there was a lot of that around at the time, and it was, as far as the people that I knew that were kind of young and having their kind of rich manager, who's just popped out of nowhere, and it was a two-way relationship in lots of ways. But I wasn't sure what I was getting out of it with Nora. That's the only thing. If it had been an exclusive spread in the Sun,
you got pissed on, honey, is what happened. You got pissed on.
I wonder. I'd love to. I've not seen him since, but I'd love to know if what he would say, whether he'd admit. I think he's honest enough to admit it rather than pretend it didn't happen. But
yeah, everybody has their own version of history. You never know what you remember and what you forget, which is why it's important to write books.
Yeah. The book's been out, the first book's out a while ago, and that had that story in it. I've not been sued yet, so it's unlikely. But yeah, that's it. That's all.
Have you ever done readings from the books? I mean, like spoken word shows?
I haven't done any of that. I don't really like that. I've narrated it though. I've enjoyed narrating it.
Great.
An audio version of it with I've kind of made it.
So that's available. That's great.
Yeah.
Were you going to go ahead?
No, sorry.
Were you going to a lot of shows in the 80s, in the 90s? Were you going out to check out the different things that were happening?
I stayed in music after ETA. I never wanted to. I could never contemplate getting a normal job, and so and I've survived ever since. And so it was not, the 90s was like a horrible period, really, when you're trying to. There's lots of like almost getting a really big deal and not getting a big deal kind of things, but the band's fucking been working hard and got a great set together and recorded some great tracks and nearly getting to the finish line, and that's something always seems to happen, and a lot of that was going on in the 90s. It was just all Britpop, and people weren't interested in any. I mean, as soon as ETA split up, as soon as punk was dead, I was a has-been, like a 17 as far as music press and record company people, and then that's pretty bad, bit of a blow at 17, and then after punk all got forgotten, then I was just a complete nobody. I wasn't even a has-been. I was just a complete nobody. So my band, I didn't even bother putting in the bio of the of the bands anything to do with ETA, because I thought the music was good enough, speaks for itself, and also no one gave a fuck about it.
Yeah. How did the music change? Like, okay, punk is dead, ETA is over. Then you're still going to be doing music sometime later. What then was the difference in the sound that you were interested in putting out?
I just became better at playing and singing and writing, and had it became like something I could do. Like I knew I could do it at 14, but I couldn't then. But now sort of it's in. So yeah, it's been, and it's the attitude for me. It's just the attitude. It's not really how fast the song is or how many loud guitars there are on it. It's always been about the attitude, that fuck you thing.
It's the energy. It doesn't matter if it's fast or slow. It doesn't matter what the tempo is. It's how much energy is coming off of the attitude.
But even if you're taking the fuck you flag, after punk, I mean, in London you have things like White House coming out. I mean, things are going pretty extreme, or even John Peel showcased Napalm Death, who were just children when they first came out too, just some years later, which is a fast band, but that's besides the point. I mean, what part of the fuck you attitude are you referring to, or is you can't really describe it?
It's that attitude that some people, it seems, have, that I've always had, that it wasn't like found, it was just had, and I met a lot of other people quickly through the punk scene through that. But it's that attitude of just literally not caring about whatever existential threat there is from the establishment or the people in your way, school teachers or parents, or to just go and think, well, fuck you, we'll just steal the guitars then, and to do that without thinking I'm a criminal now, but just doing it because it just had to be done, if without caring even about consequences. And so when the punk thing started, it was very obviously anti-establishment, and the establishment was really scared of it because
until they capitalized on it.
Yeah, but there was a lot of truths in what the bands were saying, along with a lot of bullshit and a lot of outrageous stuff for fun. But people are threatened by that, in the same way that people can listen to a stand-up comic. They can get away with making a really, really serious point, but under the guise of, so it. And now it seems like the difference now is that we're all for the establishment. We're all actually believe everything we read. We all fall in line. We support the right causes, and it's this homogeneity of thought, which is a good word, which makes it dull, and I don't, it's like the only way you could be rebellious now or do something like, there's no way the Sex Pistols could exist now, and also saying fuck on TV won't get you famous either, but there's no other ways of doing it, because I think that a lot of my peers definitely have become the establishment. They kind of in line with the establishment. And
look, I still feel that telling the fucking truth is radical, especially in this day of so much chronic, arrogant hypocrisy. The truth is still not a popular commodity.
Yeah.
The first song I wrote, Andy, was called "Popularity Is So Boring." What did I know at fucking 16 or 17? I knew that popularity was fucking boring.
John Waters, though, also has a different point where he says the counterculture now and historically has not been, it's now anonymous. So there was fashion, there was presentation to different movements throughout pop, in terms of pop culture, or even the underground pop culture. And now it's a kid asking for permission to have an ice cream after dinner, and he just shut down a bank from his bedroom. And he's, it's not as conspicuous. The rebellion is kind of hiding a little bit.
Yeah, and also back to your question, it's the whole punk attitude is also individuality. It's fucking definitely not following the next person, and it's definitely not trying to copy other people and look like them wear the same uniform, and you get the gigs and it looks like a depressing kind of Nazi rally of black t-shirted, bald-headed, the whole punk reunion thing over here, the punk community, as someone calls. Why do they always call things community? Someone always says this is our community. It's really now it's kind of come to me. It's like I'm not part of that punk community that they keep talking about, and they all have this kind of, this same thought. They all have to think the same thing. If you think one thing out of place that doesn't isn't one of the tick boxes, then forget it.
That sucks.
And it's not that I care a shit about that. They can fucking do what they like. But the fact that what they're saying they represent, they're just not representing it at all. And not worse than that is that all the suckers that turn up and get conned out of their hard-earned cash for these 3-day dismal events, in Blackpool, where they hold it every year. They come from all parts of the world. It's just insane.
Well, it's very easy to break it down. It's like the God hole that some people have, usually from some kind of brain damage, is that it's easier for people to want to be part of a collective, a community. I have a cunt community, than it is for them to decide to be an individual in anything. And the thing is, there are individuals that might form an outsider type community, but it's not based on the commonality of every concept. It's based on diversity.
What they are is just jumped up narcissists taking the opportunity to pop their heads up and say, hey, look at me. And then he's shooting at that point. But unfortunately, that's not allowed at the moment.
Well, we'll stand outside of everything as we always have, but then we'll still come together on certain points. I mean, that's what we try to do.
Of course. I mean, it doesn't matter. It's like politics wasn't important. Back in the day, when the whole thing, punk was not about anything specifically. And there was no kind of political gesturing other than, real visceral kind of politics. And to politicize it. So I don't think that if pop stars or rock stars or actors or people that you like, authors, whatever, suddenly go political on a cause, it puts me right off.
Well, I have to say, it depends on who you're talking about, because there's some that I think should open their frickin' mouths, because the loudest mouths are the liars in positions of power who are in politics. So sometimes it might be good if somebody who has a higher profile comes out with something that needs to be frickin' said. But it's just who, why?
Yeah, but it's what I don't. But it's also. Now,
I don't think they should. Wait. I don't think they should be silenced from their political beliefs, because then that's just another.
No, I don't know. I'm not saying they shouldn't do it. They can do what they like. To me, absolutely, they can do what they like. I'm just saying, from my aesthetic of how I see art, I don't see politics involved in it, and I don't want politics involved in it. But I'm not stopping anybody from doing it.
Hang
on. As somebody who's been the liver of America, complaining, it's not even about politics. It's about the politics of power and how it stamps and stomps on the fucking individual. I am forever going to be political in what I say. But it doesn't matter, because my popularity is so fucking underground. I am always going to be calling out the injustice of the imbalance of power. But then again,
good.
and I just that's what I'm going to do. But my music is not political. My spoken word
No.
will be political.
But but I still, you know, I don't personally. I try. I mean, for a little while, I didn't try it. For a little while, I did actually get sucked into speak politics, and it felt wrong. And I just, you know, it's a personal thing. I just don't.
But when I say politics, I mean the politics of the imbalance of power, because I think all fucking politicians is corrupt.
I mean, it's
exactly. So when I'm dealing with what I call politics, I'm not dealing with any political party because they all suck. I'm dealing with the greater issue, which starts both in the family, then it's in the community, then it's in politics, then it's in religion. And all of this is trying to be a fucking kick in the guts, a thumb on the fucking head, and a prison of the intellect. And that's what I rebel against. Jesus Christ, that was a good one. I'm giving myself a hand for that one.
I agree. But I suppose I think that I don't like this idea that it's one color against the other color thing. It's like everything's bullshit. They're all fucking cunts. They should all die.
But also, Andy, at least what I was taking from what you're saying is the hypocrisy in the industrialized, commodified pop culture. So you have, you know, Sting up there as this humanitarian. Meanwhile, Miles Copeland, who basically managed him, you know, he's coming from the dynasty of like CIA. I mean,
Taylor Swift,
Taylor
Swift, Leonardo DiCaprio, all complaining about climate change and flying in jets for 5 or 10 minutes. This is the kind of bullshit. You're real.
Yeah.
Just saying.
You know, the thing is, it's not like none of these things matter. What has gone wrong is that since the internet, everybody in the whole fucking world thinks they want to hear what they think about it, and suddenly things that aren't actually all that important, if you've got a loud voice, you can make them much more important than anything else and overlook really important issues.
No, that is a very important point, because the thing is, the access of the internet makes petty things political and important and overlooks the larger fucking problems.
And also it avoids the question, what are you doing believing any of these fucking cunts anyway? What are you surprised about? What is it, the hypocrisy that you didn't expect? What are you talking about?
That is exactly my
Don't you think it's mostly because people
same as it ever was, same as it fucking
they're filling up the space, like all the time pre-internet that people would have, suddenly they don't have, so they're just, maybe their anxiety of connection, they're just filling up tons of space.
I just think it was just like everything that once it's given to you, people think they need it. It's like before the telephone, before mobiles, let's say, people didn't all think, oh God, I wish I had a phone I could carry around with myself all the time, and suddenly just can't ever live without one. And the internet is just something that, you know, so you got everybody doing it, all these stupid people, fucking billions of stupid fucking idiots in the world, all in there with the cunts over there and the stupid bastards over there, the fucking pedophiles over there and the mad whatever over there, and they're all pretending there's something they're not, you know.
All right, I have to, this doesn't relate to this, but I have to say, before the alarm clock in the UK, in London, there were the waker uppers, which were women that would come and throw stones out the window when you had to get up at 4 o'clock to go to work. That would have been my job, the waker uppers.
I honestly think Rod Stewart's mom had that gig or something. I think that I read that somewhere.
It was sort of off the gig, apparently.
Anyway, you know, think for your fucking selves. That's the
exactly it. That's exactly it.
Create if it burns inside you. Otherwise, become an architect or a drug chemist. I mean, not a drug dealer. We need more good drugs from chemistry. We need more architecture. We need more social planning. We don't need really more music or art, but if it burns in you, fucking do it. And obviously, you're still burning, Andy. So thank you very much for being on the Lydia and Spin.
Thank you very much. It's been good talking.
Tim Dahl.
Yeah, nice meeting you, Andy.
Really good.
Yeah, nice one. I think we agree more on politics than we thought just then, because
absolutely.
What you're talking about to me is not politics, it's just common sense, you know. And so I don't like to call it politics.
I don't either, but you know what? The war is never over. That's the way I view it. It never will be, whatever the war is.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm an army of fucking one. Thank you very much. Lydia and Spin. Thank you.
Thanks.